darkness. Not the kind that falls at nightfall and retreats at dawn. Something older, more absolute. The darkness that exists when there is no sun to return. No warmth, no direction, no sound of wind or water, because the world that held those things has already been destroyed. This is Teotihuacan, not as the great ruins stand today, rising from the high plateau of central Mexico beneath a sky they helped to build, but as the Mexica, the people also known as the Aztec, understood it to have been at the moment before the fifth sun existed, a city already ancient by the time the Mexica arrived, already sacred, already carrying the weight of something that had happened here before human memory could reach it, and now the gods have gathered within it, assembled in complete darkness after 4 complete worlds have been made and unmade, waiting to see who among them will do what the universe now requires. What you are about to hear is not a story about the first creation. It is a story about the fifth. Most creation traditions begin at the beginning. The Aztec cosmological tradition, as recorded in the Nahuatl and Spanish-language documents of the post-conquest period, begins with evidence. The universe has already tried 4 times. 4 suns have risen and burned and been extinguished. 4 different peoples have lived and been consumed by catastrophe, by jaguars, by hurricanes, by fire from the sky, by a flood that swallowed everything. And every destruction was not merely an ending, but a clearing. The universe learning across 4 complete attempts what kind of world could endure. Our world is the 5th, and it cost the gods their lives. The sources that carry this tradition to us are post-conquest documents, every one of them written after the Spanish conquest of 1521. The Leyenda de los Soles and the Anales de Cuauhtitlan, both recorded around 1558 in the Nahuatl-language and preserved in the Codex Chimalpopoca. The Historia de los Mexicanos por sus pinturas, compiled from indigenous pictorial manuscripts in the early 1530s. The monumental Florentine Codex, assembled by the Franciscan missionary Fray Bernardino de Sahagún in consultation with Nahua informants between 1569 and 1582. The oral tradition these documents preserve is genuinely ancient, but it passed through the encounter with colonialism before it reached the written record, and that context must be held in mind as the story unfolds. Among the physical monuments that survived the Mexica civilization, none is more recognizable than what popular culture calls the Aztec calendar, a massive carved stone disc that scholars increasingly interpret not as a functional timekeeping device, but as a cosmological monument, encoding the tradition of the 5 suns and the place of the current world within the sequence. Its precise iconographic meaning remains debated. Its connection to the 5 suns tradition is genuine. The 2 primary divine forces driving the tradition across its sources are Tezcatlipoca and Quetzalcoatl. Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, god of darkness, conflict, and the night sky. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, god of wind and learning, and the breath between things. Between them, as rivals and creators and destroyers, they are the engine of the first 4 suns. Each world a product of their contention. Each destruction a consequence of the rivalry no single creation could contain. The first sun was called Nahui Ocelotl, 4 jaguar. The Leyenda de los Soles records that Tezcatlipoca presided over it, carrying the sun across a young and uncertain sky. The people of that first world are described in the tradition as giants, a race suited to an earlier, harder world, and for a time the world held. But Quetzalcoatl struck Tezcatlipoca and knocked him from the sky. When the first sun fell, darkness returned, and the jaguars came. The first world was gone, and its people with it, consumed in the collapse of a sky that could no longer hold. The universe reset. Quetzalcoatl took the sky, and the second sun rose, Nahui-ehecatl, for wind. But the rivalry between the two great gods was older than any world they built. Tezcatlipoca returned the blow. When the second sun fell, what came was not the jaguar's darkness, but wind. Hurricanes of such force that the sky itself was torn apart. The Leyenda de los Soles records that the people of the Second World were swept away and transformed. They became monkeys, scattered into a world that had otherwise ceased to exist. The world was made again. The third sun rose as Nahui-Kiawitl, for rain, and most traditions associate it with Tlaloc, the rain god, whose domain was water drawn from above. Then came the catastrophe that ended it, and it is one of mythology's most extraordinary apocalyptic images, not jaguars, not wind. The rain that fell from the third sky was not water, but fire. The Historia de los Mexicanos por sus pinturas and the Leyenda de los Soles both preserve the image. A sky raining down flame, a world consumed by the very element that should have nourished it. The people of the Third World did not escape. They were scorched and transformed, and what they became was turkeys, ground birds, earthbound, as far from the burning sky as a living creature could be. The fourth sun was Nahui-atl, for water. The goddess Chalchutlique, she of the jade skirt, presided over it, and the fourth world endured longest, its people the most fully formed of any the universe had yet attempted. But the flood came, water so total and so absolute that the sky itself dissolved into it. And yet, and the Leyenda de los Soles is explicit on this point, the fourth world was not entirely without survivors. The tradition records that a man named Tata and his wife Nena were warned by Tezcatlipoca, instructed to hollow out a great cypress tree and take refuge within it, bringing only a single ear of corn each. They survived, but survival brought its own reckoning. When the floodwaters receded, Tata and Nena cooked a fish without the god's permission, and for that act of disobedience, they were transformed into dogs. The fourth world had ended. Its inheritors had been remade into something lesser, and the sky above them was dark. 4 suns extinguished, 4 peoples made and lost, or diminished into new forms, and the gods gathered at Teotihuacan in the darkness that followed. A city already ancient far beyond the Mexica's own origins, built by civilizations that had preceded them on that plateau by many centuries. The Mexica did not build Teotihuacan. They inherited it and understood it as the place where something of cosmic consequence was about to occur. In the darkness, the gods convened. A 5th sun was needed, but 4 previous creations had demonstrated that a sun could not simply be willed into existence. The tradition recorded in the Leyenda de los Soles is explicit. What the 5th creation required was sacrifice, not offerings, not ceremony, but the most absolute currency available. 2 gods came forward. The first was Tecutecatl, proud and wealthy among the gods, radiantly powerful, accustomed to precedence. He arrived at Teotihuacan laden with precious things, quetzal feathers where simple reeds were expected, thorns carved from red coral, offerings that announced the fullness of his divine standing. He was magnificent, and he knew it. The second was Nahuatl, poor and humble, his body marked by disease, sores on his skin, impoverished in every worldly sense. He arrived with what the Florentine Codex records with unflinching specificity: green reeds tied together, the dried scabs from his own diseased flesh, and magai spines still slick with his own blood. He brought what he had, and what he had was suffering made into offering. A great fire was built at Teotihuacan. The gods arranged themselves in a circle around it. 4 days of ritual preparation preceded the moment. Fasting, penance, the careful accumulation of readiness. And when the moment came, Teotihuacan was asked to leap first. He was the powerful one, the prepared one, the one who had arrived with precious things. He approached the fire and stopped. He approached again and stopped again. The Leyenda de los Soles records 4 attempts, 4 moments of approach and retreat, the god drawing back from the full weight of what the leap demanded, not the physical heat alone. The understanding that this was not a sacrifice that could be undone. 4 failures. Then the gods turned to Nahuatl. He did not hesitate. He did not approach and retreat. He gathered himself and he leaped, once without turning back, directly into the heart of the sacred fire. And the darkness at Teotihuacan blazed. Nahuatl, poor, diseased, humble Nahuatl, who had brought scabs and blood where the other brought coral, became the sun. Teotihuacan, shamed by what he had witnessed, then leapt also, and he too was transformed, but he became the moon. 2 great lights hung in the sky above Teotihuacan, both shining with equal brilliance. But the gods understood that 2 suns of equal brightness would unmake the balance of the sky. One of the assembled gods struck the moon with a rabbit. The tradition records it precisely, and its light was dimmed to the softer glow it carries to this day. But the sun and moon rose into the sky and did not move. They hung there, burning and still, lighting a world that had not yet begun to function, and the gods understood, as they had not fully understood before, what the 5th creation actually required. Not just sacrifice to create the sun, but sacrifice to sustain it. The heavens would not move by divine intention alone. Quetzalcoatl, the wind aspect of the feathered serpent, blew with his full force, and the tradition records his breath as one of the forces that helped push the heavens toward motion. But the complete price was greater. One by one the assembled gods offered their divine lives, their blood, their sacred energy, their existence, so that the 5th sun could do what none of its predecessors had managed: cross the sky, keep crossing it, continue. Nahuatl, 4 movement, crossed the sky above Teotihuacan for the first time, and the world that is our world began. What does it mean that the Mexica understood their universe this way? The 5 suns tradition is a cosmological philosophy as much as a creation story, a complete framework for understanding time, existence, and the ongoing relationship between gods and humanity. The universe in Aztec understanding was not a gift handed down from an inexhaustible source. It was a fragile, costly, repeatedly attempted achievement. Something that had failed 4 times, and that succeeded only when the gods stopped offering things and offered themselves. That debt ran through everything that followed. The Florentine Codex records that Quetzalcoatl descended into Mictlan, the underworld, to retrieve the bones of the dead from previous ages, and bled from his own body over them to bring the people of the fifth world to life. The blood of gods was not only the engine of the sun's motion, it was the substance from which fifth world humanity was made. The Aztec understanding of human sacrifice, documented extensively across the post-conquest sources, must be held within this framework to be understood accurately. It was understood as reciprocal cosmic maintenance, the continuation of the sacrifice the gods had made, offered back to sustain the heavens and honor the debt written into human existence from the first moment of it. The choice of Nahuatl as the god who became the sun carries a specific weight within all of this. The humble, the diseased, the impoverished. They did what the magnificent could not. The sun that lights the fifth world was not lit by greatness performing a great act. It was lit by the least of the gods performing the most courageous one. That understanding, that sacrifice and courage are not the properties of the powerful, is encoded into the sky every morning. The fifth sun carries its own eventual end within its name. Olin means movement, but it is also the glyph associated with earthquakes, with the tectonic disruption that will one day bring the sky down. The Mexica understood that the fifth sun would not endure any more than the first 4 had. It would end in its own specific catastrophe, not jaguars, not wind, not fire from the sky, not flood, but movement, the earth shaking until everything that holds collapses. They knew this, they lived fully within this knowledge, and they did not flinch from it. Every morning the sun rose, it had been purchased again, by the gods who died at Teotihuacan, by the blood Quetzalcoatl shed over ancient bones, by the ongoing obligations the Mexica understood themselves to carry, not as burden, but as the only honest accounting of what existence costs and what it is worth. A diseased and humble god leaped into a sacred fire without hesitation. The sun that rose from that fire is still crossing the sky. It will not cross it forever. The Mexica knew that too. They fed it anyway. This legend has been told. Subscribe and return to Aeonkeep. More legends await.